those who have been the beneficiaries of the system. Welcome to On the Record, and I'm so glad to have back my distinguished and favorite guest, Reverend Al Sharpton, who really has always been a voice for justice, equity, and civil rights. So today, from courtroom victories, preserving affirmative action, to the looming threat of a government shutdown, the startling disparities in funding HBCUs, and even a new office that is on gun violence and prevention. We're going to be delving a little bit into each of these topics, but I want to first start, Rev, you've been in Atlanta, and I want to talk about the significant victory for the advocates of affirmative action as the Fearless Fund, championed with you right there by their side, faced legal challenges from conservative activists, the same ones that brought the challenges on affirmative action. Talk about what happened, what they were trying to do, and now what a judge has decided.
Well, the Fearless Fund is two Black women formed a fund to raise money in the private sector to give seed money grants to Black women and other women in underserved communities to start their businesses or to support their businesses. Why? Because many Black women entrepreneurs cannot get money out of banks, could not get money out of financial investment houses. So these are two women who had gone through that experience, decided to open up a nonprofit and work with getting major capital investors, corporations to invest in their fund. They would scrutinize to make sure that they were doing what was due diligence and knowing that the companies they invest in are solid and good. And they did. They raised a few $1 million. They started giving out a lot of money. Ed Blum and his group, which includes Stephen Miller, who's close to Donald Trump, they were the group that went after Harvard University and North Carolina College around affirmative action, and they won, where the basic, the meat and bones of the affirmative action was taken out by the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. After they got that victory, they immediately went out. They got over 30 state attorney generals to write Fortune 50 companies saying you can no longer use diversity, contracts, and all, because the language of the affirmative action decision said race cannot be a factor. It is discrimination using an 1800 law. The law in the 1800s now was to protect Blacks, saying that you cannot discriminate. They're now using a law for us against us. They got over 30 state attorney generals. They started writing, this is Blum and them, they started writing major corporations on their DEI project. And they decide they want to file a lawsuit against these two Black women in Atlanta, saying that by saying they're going to invest in Black women is a discrimination. And that we want them to be enjoined because they are getting ready to do another dump of funds. When we heard about it, we saw it as a civil rights issue. We be a National Action Network and other groups. And they had a date to enjoin them, a judge at federal court in Atlanta, to have an injunction because they were going to have the next dump of funds later in 4 days of the hearing. They wanted to stop the hearing and join it. We went down. We got a couple hundred people from National Action Network Atlanta. I flew down because I felt that we could not see those women walk in that courtroom alone, because the issue is bigger than just their company. This is an issue of now you're telling Blacks, who you told to lift ourselves by our bootstraps, that we can't invest money in ourselves. So let me get this right. You don't want to give social progress and you don't want us to do business with each other. I sat in the courtroom with them, and the judge asked very poignant questions. He said, well, let me ask you this. Are you saying that if they give money to Black women, and they are Black women, who is being discriminated against? Is that discrimination against white women? Or then in an Italian community or an Irish community or Jewish community, when they do things of their descent, is that discriminatory? They're not excluding others. They are on a campaign to uplift people that had been historically denied. And the judge ruled that he denied the injunction. So that was a victory, because it as some said, it was a small victory, but if he had enjoined it, it would have had ramifications all over. They're appealing it. We'll see what happens with the appeal, but we have to fight this all the way. But if someone would have told most of us 3 years ago that affirmative action would be killed by this court, and that you'd start having Blacks sued for giving Black capital investment, people would have said, I'm not talking 30 years ago, I'm talking about 3 years ago, we said that's impossible. Well, that's why elections matter, because you stack the Supreme Court with people that would vote against affirmative action. You embolden, as a result of that, people like Ed Blum. And now we're fighting not even to make progress, we're fighting to maintain what we already had. Affirmative action and the programs of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Already had them. Now they're all under threat. Why? Why? Because, Ebony, you had too many people, particularly Black men, walking around talking about, well, I don't see the difference between Hillary and Trump. I ain't voting. Well, you put 3 people on the Supreme Court. That was the difference.
Oof. Not only, Rev, are they not excluding, but they're including in this economic fight a group of women, a sector, Black women that have been excluded. And so right. their mission is inclusion. When we talk about Black women receiving 1% of venture capital in 2022, how you have the audacity to come with a case like this kind of leads me to think, okay, we had the Supreme Court case with admissions, now this attack on DEI. I'm curious about what is on this full list of everything that they're going to go after. I'm sure they weren't surprised at what happened in this case, but these are kind of like test cases for how far we can go, how many states will also begin to get on board, and what kind of impact that they can really have. We are now looking, you just made the example of we couldn't imagine this. If you would have said this would have happened before, we wouldn't really imagine this. But now that we are here, we just had the Supreme Court case. Now we have this case. What else do you perceive that they may even go after next?
I think they're going to go after contracts. They're going to go after major firms saying you can no longer use a goal of having X amount of Blacks in your contracts. So when someone like me from National Action Network goes and meets with McDonald's, Burger King, General Motors, and say, how many Black businesses are you doing? They will then have to say, we can't talk about that because that is now against the law, and we can't even ask whether something is Black owned or not. They intend to do what they said. And it was right in front of our face. They intend to make America great again, MAGA. And that meant pre-1954 America. The real issue, Ebony, is not what they're doing. The issue is, why aren't we fighting back?
Right.
And that's why we had the march. That's why we've been since the march fighting around these issues, because my thing is, I don't mind. I don't like it, but I don't mind getting beat in a fight. But I doggone sure ain't going to get beat because I wouldn't fight. We haven't been fighting back.
Wow. Whew. And part of that fight, like when we talk about what that fight looks like, part of that is also demanding accountability from our companies where we spend our dollars at.
Well, and see, you hit a key point. What I've said to the private sector is that you cannot legislate consumers.
Yes.
So you can go ahead and play games with Blum all you want. They can't make us shop from you. So what we've been doing in collective leadership meetings is saying, we're going to target 1 or 2 of these big companies that go with them and shut them down. because they can't force you to make they can't force us to buy your product. We got to go back to to what we used to do, boycotts.
Boycott.
And let's not forget the only reason we had affirmative action and DEI is because we fought. Wasn't like folks woke up one morning and said, let's be nice to Negroes. We forced the private sector to do DEI. We forced them to deal with college admissions with affirmative action. And how did we force them? With street heat, with legal fights. It was always a combination. It wasn't one strategy. It was always a combination of us. And that's what we're doing now. I told Ben Crump and Alfonso David and them, y'all do the legal thing with the Fearless Fund. I'll put bodies in the street. We want the combination of both.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we find ourselves, Rev, on the precipice of another potential government shutdown, largely attributed to the GO push for deep spending cuts. Republicans in the House are trying to stand firm. I'll say this complete right-wing MAGA wing of Republican Party standing on their demands, and a Democratic-controlled Senate and President Biden urging for a resolution. Literally, we have until Sunday to see what's going to happen in this. And I was just kind of flipping through Twitter and looking at some interviews with there are real life consequences behind this. And I feel like we keep playing this cat mouse game, and it looks like this time Republicans are standing firm and they are not going to budge. But we're talking about 7 million people going to be affected even by a cut of WIC and SNAP. We have veterans. They are putting something in place for veterans, but you have federal workers, over 850,000 federal workers who stand to get any pay. And at the same time, we're also at a point where September 30th, they're going to be ending all the spending that was going to go towards COVID relief, towards childcare. It is almost like this storm that is not brewing, but is here. What is your take on this shutdown?
The take is that it will disproportionately impact our people. We're the federal workers. We're the ones that use, as you have stated, the whole question of supplemental food and income, and that will at best be delayed in getting to us, if at all. And I think that we have never been in a position where you've had a handful of right-wingers be able to just intimidate the speaker, because he won very narrowly. So the only hope is to see some kind of bipartisan agreement where the Democrats give McCarthy enough to give us a continuing resolution, and we kick the can down the road. Otherwise, we're going to see a shutdown Sunday. And I think that we are going to feel the impact more than most in America. This will not bother the 1%. It will bother the people at the bottom.
How do you see McCarthy? Do you see him almost as, we understand his position, but he is so beholden to this handful of people, almost seeming powerless. Do you see any power that he has in this situation?
No, none at all. He gave away his power to become speaker. And the bill is due now. They said, we want you to do this, that, and the other. If we say jump, you already be in the air and say how high. And I think that he imagined that somehow, once he had the gavel, that he could change the equation, and he couldn't.
No. So talk about stuck in the middle.
Yeah.
I want to quickly just talk also about two more topics. One, the creation of the Office of Gun Violence and Prevention. During Congressional Black Caucus Week, I was there in the Rose Garden when the president, alongside Kamala Harris and Congressman Maxwell Frost, the first Gen Zer in office, announced the plans for this new office and the 4 points that it is going to do. And it's going to be, in some ways, in addition to some of the executive orders that the president has already pushed, but they're also going to work even more with advocacy groups in the community that are going to help move the needle forward when it comes to gun violence, which the president led by saying is the #1 killer for youth in this country, a country that we always call the greatest and is this and is that, but why are our youth dying at such alarming levels? What is your hope for this new office?
I think that my hope is that we rally around it across racial lines. Let's not forget, this is not only Black kids being killed
Right.
with these AR-15s and military-style weapons. Look at Highland. Look at all of this. I think that with the vice president, who I think was appropriately appointed over this, being her background as a prosecutor, and as long as I've known her, and I've known her since she was the DA in San Francisco, has worked on these issues. But I think she needs people on the ground, area by area, community by community, neighborhood by neighborhood, that will be the anti-violence squads, that will be the ones that go out and help to implement what comes down from Washington. We need a decentralized state infrastructure that she can head up, where we can measure the gun violence that is taken down around the country. Secondly, we need the Congress to act, and this is beyond the purview of the vice president, on gun laws. Right. How do we have all of these? I think I saw a statistic that every day there's 2 mass shootings. How do we have all these mass shootings, most of with military-style weapons, and we can't even pass a background check in the Congress? Not even a background check. I preached the funeral, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, of the young lady killed in Jacksonville, Florida. This guy came and shot up the store, the general store there, killed this woman and 2 others. He had an AR-15 with a SWAT stick on it, and he had a mental health background problem, which they did not know about when they sold him the gun. We can't even get background checks. I've never in a million years would have imagined the country would look and step over the graves of young white kids.
Right.
Young white kids.
We thought that was going to make them change. Like, okay, when it comes to their community, then they'll change. No, they ain't even changing.
National Rifle Association and others have got them where they are just totally obstinate and immovable. So we've got to be more determined than them.
Lastly, it is HBCU week. And during this week, it's really come to light for many about the disparities. There's been a $12 billion disparity in funding between land-grant HBCUs and their non-HBCU counterparts in many states, 16 or 19 different states. And it's not just a figure, but it really points to the deep-seated inequities that exist within our higher education system. And they are, I mean, it is so ingrained and so rooted. So now you have the Secretary of Education and the USDA sending these letters to these universities. But while we have this conversation and at the same time, this affirmative action conversation, it is just disturbing, right? That we don't, number one, cover stories like this more often. And also for those who are feeling helpless and hopeless, like, what is it that we can begin to do in this area?
Well, I think that we've got to, as we go in this election year, because we're already just about in October, is to really put on the table that HBCUs must be undergirded, must be funded, must be supported, particularly now since you've knocked out affirmative action. So the need for HBCUs, particularly in our community, has been heightened because the admissions process now has been tainted because affirmative action is gone. We need to make that a central campaign issue. So as we look at Trump versus Biden, and that's the way it looks now, force Trump and the Republicans to say they don't care about HBCU. Force them to say that. We know that Biden has put some money there. It would create the climate for him to be able to put more. Force it. Part of what you do in politics is you force your opponent into where they can't just have it both ways. And I think that we are so busy asking Trump irrelevant questions that we have not made him go on the record on the right thing. The thing that he said that blacks, I've gone up in the poll with blacks because I took a mugshot, like all of us are criminals and all of us have mugshots. We play on that and don't ask him, what about HBCUs? What about gun control? We need to act fine. Y'all are going to take an indicted crook to make a president? Well, let's ask him some real hard questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Rev Sharpton, it is always a pleasure to have you here on AURN. Look forward to speaking with you again, sir.
Thank you. Look forward to it.